Dear colleagues, welcome to this webinar organized by the Quality Board, or to be precise, the Research Evaluation Advisory Committee of the Quality Board. My name is Riitta Pyykkö and I'm a Quality Board member and will be a moderator of this webinar. For a start, I would like to share with you some practical info. Is Siggy the next, please? Here, yes, thank you, Siggy. So this webinar will be recorded and the slides and videos will be available online after this webinar on the events page of the Quality Board website. Please mute speaker at all times if you are attending the webinar and turn off cameras, but of course presenters will have cameras on. During the webinar, I'll take also questions from the audience, so write your questions. So somebody, thank you. So write your questions using the chat function. And I'll select the questions from the chat. Unfortunately, we have quite a tight schedule, but I'll try to find time also questions from audience. So the aim of this webinar is to highlight current international approaches to the development and implementation of research evaluation. Our speakers today come from different disciplinary and national backgrounds and experience in evaluation of higher education. The topic of this webinar is timely. Discussions are going on in Iceland about the review of the evaluation system of public universities, revision of funding mechanisms of Icelandic universities, including how funds should be distributed for research activity, and a trial for the new research information system, REAC, is expected to start in the fall. There are several big questions to discuss. Is quantity emphasized over quality? If yes, how could we move away from simple counts? Is it possible to apply the same system for instance, medicine and the arts? What is impact? Do we appreciate research impact beyond academia at all? Should evaluation have a direct effect on state funding, promotion or salaries, etc., etc.? So there is a clear need to examine the different approaches and trends and their usefulness and consider what the Icelandic higher education can learn from this. Once more, welcome. I wish us all an interesting and thought-provoking webinar. We'll start with 3 presentations by our international experts, Paula Crabtree, Frank Miedema, and Gunnar Sivertsen. Frank Miedema is Vice Rector for Research at Utrecht University and Chair of the Utrecht University Open Science Program, as well as former Dean and Vice Chairman of the Executive Board of the University Medical Center, Utrecht. He's one of the initiators in 2013 of Science in Transition, and I have heard that he believes that the academic incentive and reward system is in need of fundamental reform. Gunnar Sivertsen is research professor and head of bibliometric research at the Nordic Institute of Studies for Studies in Innovation, Research and Education, NIFU, in Oslo, Norway. His research contributes to science-based innovation in the development of research evaluation, research funding, and the use of indicators. He has advised the development of research evaluation and funding systems in several countries. Paula Crabtree is Vice Chancellor at Stockholm University of the Arts, Executive Board member and founding member of the EQ Arts, and former Vice Chairman of the European League of Institutes of the Arts. She has extensive experience in evaluation of arts education and research in the arts. So we have here 3 excellent experts And what is, to my mind, especially important, they come from different fields with different experience and I suppose also different views. The schedule is tight and you have only 1 minute, not 1, but 10. You have only 10 minutes each. So please, Frank, the microphone is yours.
Thank you. I'll start immediately with sharing my screen. It should run now, yeah, okay. I think the organizers, can everybody hear me and see the screen? Yeah?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I thank the organizers for inviting me. It's an honor and a pleasure. And I have to say immediately that indeed I have been, say, engaged with this issue for a long time, for nearly 30 years, roughly. And so this is very dear to my heart. And I really believe that we should take care of and should pay attention to rethinking the recognition and reward system in academia. This is also the title of my slide, and it's also in the context of open science. So I think I will not go over a lot of, say, empirical data, arguing, scholarly publishing about why there is a really a case for rethinking research evaluation. I think the major issue is metrics shape science, and also the speakers, the next speakers will discuss how some metrics are, say, influencing what we think about excellence, what excellence is, quality, etc. But the metrics we are now dominantly using, and I think also in Iceland, but lo and behold, in the rest of the world, it's about novelty and quantity, and they are dominant over quality, replication, relevance, and societal impact. There's also in the system, I will show you in the next slide, the system is short, say, cycle, has a short cycle. So if you want to address a real complex problem, you have the chance of having being, say, a poor scientist, because you cannot produce papers in 4 years. What's very important for the people from the social science and humanities is, based on the metrics we use, I'm a chemist on background, chemists and natural sciences are always in higher esteem than social science and humanities, and also applied research is in lower esteem compared to basic science. And this all has an enormous effect on how we choose our, say, national institutional research agendas. And somebody is discussing, and this is extremely important, so that the research agendas are not really
rethinking.
Please, okay, thank you.
Sorry? Yeah, okay. And so I have to point to, and this is, I have very little time, but this is something that you should, if you are interested, say, dive into. And academia is a sociological game, is what they say in France, a genre, a field. And this is a field where professional interests, elites, stratification, power struggle, and economics, everything is at play. Because what you see here is that, for instance, I made my career based on articles produced in the laboratory, and I made my career based on these articles. So I got my recognition, I got money, I hired my own staff, I became a professor, we produced papers, and this is how the credit circle is working. And of course, this seems to be an exaggeration, but after 10 years being on the dean of a large university, having talked to many people in Europe, this is really roughly how the system also in Iceland is working. This is how we make a career, how we are building scientific and social capital. And of course, we have to realize that what type of articles, what type of performance assessments are determining who's becoming a professor, who will become director, who will become, etc., etc. So this is a game that we all play, the vice chancellors, directors, the deans, everybody is in this game. And I have been in this game for 30 years, and I made a career. And of course, this is, we all feel that this has gone too far. The system as we use it now, and this will be also discussed by the second and the third, say, speaker after me, the system is very much on qualitative terms, on articles, number of articles, H indexes, amount of funding, although it has been argued again and again and again that these indicators are very poor proxies for quality, for real quality. When I was very young, we were just reading papers and not counting them. And of course, also everything is behind paywalls. So if we produce something on HIV/AIDS, it cannot be read in the poor countries in Sub-Saharan Africa or in Latin America. And the other thing which you all recognize is there's an enormous pressure for the funds, for limited funds. So everybody is producing those articles to get hold on the next round of, say, funding. And this is, of course, driving the circle to the next round, producing articles, getting recognition, getting the third round of funding, etc., etc. I myself have been 20 times through the circle. And this, of course, is all about individual, first author, last author. And this is not only in the sciences, but this is also in social sciences, economics, and psychology, sociology. You see it everywhere in academia. And of course, it can also be about books. So team science, multidisciplinarity, diversity is not really helped by this type of multidisciplinarity, especially is not helped by these, say, these metrics that we use now. I will not discuss a lot, but the integral, the comprehensive approach of open science is to increase quality, progress, and scientific and societal impact. And there's a huge program now going on in Europe, which is also a real European program in Horizon Europe, has also been in the Horizon 2020. And this is being driven mainly by Europe, but also by a lot of countries in South America and Africa. So this is you are not alone. This is a huge program in the world. Again, this will be discussed by the speakers that come after me. It's not about journal impact factors. It's not about H-index. It's not about numbers of publications. So this is the DORA assessment rules. It's about engaging non-academic stakeholders. Think about what type of research you're doing based on real problems in the real world. And this, of course, also has to address diversity and inclusiveness. We will hear about that later on. And of course, it's not about papers, but it's all about narrative. So if a scientist can explain in words, in a short narrative, what she has been doing and what she wants to do when she comes to Iceland University, that's the thing you have to go for. And not only where have you published, and oh, then of course you know how to publish, so you will be fine in the coming years. This is really about, and this is being changed now in many countries. This is very hard to change because people have to be learned how to write narratives and how to explain what type of research they're doing to peers, but also to, say, the lay people. And this, of course, also relates to open science. And this is, again, so if you look again at the credit cycle, what we really want to do is we want to have inclusive indicators. You will hear from it in the next talks. Quality, it should be a real quality and not proxies. Societal impact, public engagement is very important. Are we engaging, say, people from outside? For instance, if it's about education, are we engaging people who are in education, really in the classroom? And of course, it's about ED. So this is very important. And of course, in the end, of course, I will argue again with you that science is there to improve society, to improve the quality of our life. Science is there for the good life. And I think that's an interesting discussion. And we may disagree about it, but this is something that we should discuss. And by having this type of open science programs, my last sentence, I think we have started to discuss. We have started to discuss with rectors, vice chancellors all over Europe, all over the country, and all over, even in Latin America, Australia, in China, these discussions are going on. What is science for? And here I stop, and I'm looking forward to an interesting debate in the next hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Frank. And the next presentation will be by Gunnar. Gunnar, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all of you, and thank you for being able to speak to you about this important topic. I will focus on research evaluation systems at the national and institutional level and their purposes. I will also talk about some practical issues that I understand from the information we have got on in the Icelandic system. So the two major purposes of research evaluation systems are whether we can distinguish whether they are formative, that they are there to learn from the past and look forward, and then to serve strategic development. But the purpose may also be mainly summative, to look at past performance and to check whether goals or expectations were reached. And these summative systems often serve decisions or resource allocation. So if evaluation systems are connected to funding mechanisms, they tend to be summative in their approach. I will give examples. So you know about formative research evaluation from different levels in the academic world, from the individual level up to the national level, as my examples of questions show. So these questions are directed towards the future or the near future and about possible improvements. Now, summative research evaluation, they mainly look backwards and they check whether performance has been okay. And as I say that, it's most often connected to the allocation of resources or funding. Now, as researchers, we are evaluated all the time. It happens whenever we finish a project and try to get it published. It happens when we apply for a position or a promotion or for local resources. And it happens when we apply for external funding. This is normal procedures all the time. So if the organizational national evaluation systems are not there, we will even be evaluated all the time. At the organization level, we have indicator-based institutional funding system. They are sometimes called evaluation system, but I don't think they work so much as evaluations. They work with indicators to allocate. Then we have summative organizational evaluation systems that mainly look at past performance, often to rate them or rank them. And then we have formative organizational evaluations that look forward and try to learn. The interesting thing in the academic world is that they often build on the models, the methods of individual level evaluations. So they sum up what each of us, how each of us perform, and then put it into statistics or reviews by panels that turn out as allocations or indicators or ratings. It's interesting that organizational level factors are seldom put into the evaluation. There are indicator-based systems, mainly in small countries. They are quite widespread. They are not really evaluation systems. They are used to allocate funding at the national institutional level. And they typically apply minimum 2 indicators, bibliometrics and external funding, most often combined with indicators of educational activity. The example I show here is the indicators that have been decided for this purpose across several countries, originating in Norway. And this is not an indicator that was mentioned by Frank in the previous lecture, because it's not the H index, it's not the journal impact factor, and it's not simple publication counts. It's an indicator that tries to balance between research and publishing traditions in all fields, all across the humanities, and even takes into consideration local language publishing. And it balances also between the publication practices among those fields. So therefore, it's also used at the universities in these countries to overview their own research activity. Then we have the best known research evaluation system that works in a summative way. And it's because it's strongly connected to the distribution of funds to the universities. But it is built on an individual level assessment model originally. Interestingly, Australia decided to disconnect their funding system, evaluation system, from funding a few years ago, but they still continue it as it was, modeled on individual level assessment and rating the universities according to indicators, although they didn't need to now. So formative organizational evaluations are rare in research. This is a definition of that even originates from Australia. And as you can see, the main focus is on the organization itself and the factors that affect performance. It's not down to the individual researcher necessarily. The organization is the primary unit of analysis. And these organizations are started or used to understand what these organizations can or should change to improve their ability to perform. So outside the academic world, this is the type of organizational evaluation that most often is used in both the private and the public sector. Now, there are examples of formative evaluation systems that are not connected to funding. So Frank mentioned, I think, the SET in Netherlands, which is a guidelines for the universities to evaluate themselves at every 6 years. And they are evaluations to learn from. And we have the same at the national level in Norway. We don't only have the publication indicator for funding allocation, we have a real evaluation system that is there to give advice and uses peer review to do this. Uppsala University is one of the several Nordic universities that practice self-evaluations over time. And it's so interesting to see that in 2007, they used a traditional REF model, reviewing what the researchers did or had done. But they moved on gradually to a professional formative model. How can we improve as an organization? And I think this example is interesting, as Iceland now discusses how to evaluate for quality. Now, our indicator in Norway is used at the individual level by the universities and departments, although it was not intended to do so. It was designed for institutional level research activity measurement. But the indicator is there and it's both used and abused. So the publishing board gave 4 points of advice, 4 guidelines that I now end my introduction with, because I've seen from the paper on the Icelandic situation that they might be relevant also in Iceland. So several limitations of bibliometrics are pointed out. So in this situation where with recruitment, promotion, career follow-up, and distribution of tasks and resources, they should be based on holistic and customized assessments, it says. Other qualifications than formal research performance need to be considered in most cases, and even in assessments of research alone, metrics have limited value because they are not foresighted. They do not consider career opportunities, and they cannot make responsible decisions. So the other 3 guidelines are just more details of these principles. Metrics will always look backwards towards past performances, but assessment for employment, promotion, and allocation of resources always look forward towards potential performance and be in line with expectations expressed in calls for applications and in guidelines for resource allocation. Research takes place in more or less active phases depending on other tasks, available resources, and types of projects and collaborations. Careers may also be paused for external reasons. So understanding such differences in career opportunities is part of responsible leadership in research. Metrics cannot consider this. And metrics cannot decide. Metrics can be useful when screening a high number of applications, for example, before further assessment of relevant qualifications. But the value of using metrics will decrease and eventually disappear as the assessment process comes closer to a final responsible decision. So qualitative methods will be needed instead. And that concludes my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Gunnar. Thank you. And the third introductory presentation is by Paula. Paula, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Gunnar. Now, unlike my colleagues here, I'm going to completely contain myself to talking about artistic research. And this is because this is the field that I work in. It's what I know best. And it's also, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges that we have, simply because we still call it a relatively new field. Of course, at the same time, it isn't. It's been around for, at least I've been working with artistic research in Norway and in Sweden for at least 20 years. And I've worked in Austria and Switzerland also helping develop it for quite a long time. But I felt even so that there is a need to contextualize what we're talking about. So these three references here, in fact, they were written by Christopher Frayling back in 1994. And what I'm concerned about is research through the arts. So I'm talking about the arts that we make rather than any theoretical approach. So that's my kind of starting point for this. And I apologize to everybody else if it feels not relevant. I actually think it is, especially if you're going to start considering new ways of considering what art, any kind of research, how to look at it in terms of quality. Now, of course, across Europe and beyond, there's still a lot of different approaches to it. In the UK, artistic research, the end result is usually some sort of text which belongs with the practice, and the practice, if you like, disappears and the text is the thing that stands. I think that could be a lot to do with the REF, the exercise of the research evaluation that they have in the UK. In the Nordic countries, in Norway, in Sweden, the artistic practice is absolutely central to the research. And of course, we're still discussing this in a lot of places. So, you know, earlier, all the different networks are discussing it. There's been publications, the Florence Principles, there's the Vienna Declaration. There's a new thing based in the Netherlands called Creator Doctus. And this is all about developing artistic research as being the central tenement from the practice for our space. Now, I never like to say that arts education and research is different to anybody else. But at the same time, we're kind of swimming in a system development that was made for the scientists, that was made for academia. And it's we're kind of being forced to be using these systems that just don't seem to work for us. And certainly when I was in Norway, we talked with Kristin to see if Kristin could make it so it worked for us. Here in Sweden, I'm talking to DIVA, which is a similar kind of system. Can that work for us? And some of the challenges that we have with it, of course, is the terminology. It's seldom that we publish. I'll come back to that shortly. But we've got other challenges like copyright. If I have an opera that is part of my research and I'm using music that belongs to someone else, how do I publish that? If I've made a film, I can't put a full film and make it available on the Open Science Network. So we've got challenges about how we deal with these things. Research Catalogue is, you can say, the only European or even international space that is built for putting other things other than text into it. So that works to a certain extent, but it's still not acceptable by most bibliometrics. So if I move on for that, so what kind of terminology and what can we use? Well, of course, because we're doing things live and because they're there. So one of the things that is important is we're starting to use exposition instead of publication as a term to say what we're dealing with. Now, all these slides that I'm showing you, they're all coming out from various research projects. These are all two-dimensional pictures of research that is happening live. And of course, at any time of documentation, you're always going to get a documentation of something live. But when it happens in the space live. And that is incredibly important for us as well. So I need to come back to that. And then what does artistic research do? Well, of course, in the field, it's very important because it's strengthening the field of artistic practice and it's developing and expanding its reach. So that's important for us. But it goes beyond the field, doesn't it? What are we doing beyond the field that's ourselves? Well, we're also, of course, incredibly important in creating a discourse in a democratic society. But we're reaching a larger population. We're also working a lot more interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary in our works, evolving all the time. But what about impact? Well, this is an interesting dilemma, because as an artist, everything that you're doing is available all the time. You're always exhibiting it, you're always performing it, it's always on the stage. And so we have to really be sure about the difference between the artistic impact of a practice and the research. What is the research? What's the step on from it? And what's important there? Everything we do is being critiqued from anything on the stage has always been. So we've always had peer review. As artists, we've always had peer review. So again, what's the next step on? And how can we measure the difference between the impact of the arts and the impact of artistic research? One of the things that certainly as a researcher, you suddenly get time to do the research that as an artist practitioner, you don't tend to have. You're usually working towards an exhibition, towards a stage, towards something. So that's different. And also you start belonging to a research environment that quite often as a practitioner, you never have that chance. And you also have the chance to work beyond your own discipline. So then again, what are the aims of a research evaluation? Well, often in Sweden, it's to talk about, well, how can we assure that taxpayers' money is being used in a good way? That's a very Swedish thing. And Gunnar was into talking about promotion and recruitment. So what do we look at when we're getting new teachers and researchers into our universities as well? What is that, the measures there? What strengths and potential of quality and impact are they for the university? And then a lot of it then is again back to money, increasing competition between the different universities, and how do we get a larger share of funding? Although it has to be said that the amount of funding that is available generally for artistic research is very, very small compared with others. But at the end of the day, whatever the specific aims are, they absolutely need to be relevant to the institution and give meaning to it. And this is, I mean, something that I really think that we need to think about. Using all these bibliometrics, they don't seem to work for us in a good way. Is there a system that's established? These are things that I've seen used, point systems. I think from my experience, peer review, both local, but also especially for the arts, international peer review is vital. So I'm going to leave it there. I've just got one last slide, and this is from one of my colleagues. It's a choreographer, and it's a slide from her research work. And the focus of her research was end-of-life care, and she was working with Karolinska Institute. She's a choreographer, and she was developing methods of connection. So talking to people who are at the end of their life, it was based on touch rather than on language, because language wasn't existing. And she says the handheld methods are now being used in other related contexts in palliative and dementia care. And that's simply as a result of an artist researcher working up against the scientists. And this is just one of them, the slides of her publications, if you like, her exposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula, Gunnar, Frank, for your really inspiring presentations. Now it's time for the first initial reactions from the Icelandic panelists. And we have here Jon Atli Benediktsson and Ragnhildur Helgadottir. Jan Atli has long experience in university management and leadership in Iceland, as well as international collaboration. And he's rector and president of the University of Iceland from 2015. And before that, pro-rector of science and academic affairs. And his scientific background is in electrical and computer engineering. Jan Atli is also the chair of the Icelandic Rectors Conference. Ragnhildur Helgadóttir is the new president of Reykjavik University, so congratulations for appointment. Ragnhildur has been a professor at the Department of Law from 2006 and has extensive experience in university management. Since 2019, she has held the position of Dean of the School of Social Sciences. She has also been entrusted with several high duties, both at national and international levels. So now we have here engineering and law, in addition to these disciplines we had before. Please, Jan Atli, would you like to start?
Thank you very much, Rita. And it's a great pleasure to be with you all here today. And I would like to thank the Quality Board for initiating this discussion. It's very important. And I guess I'm being asked to sort of comment on the talks in relation to the evaluation systems we have here in Iceland, in particular the evaluation system of the public universities in Iceland, which is also used by Bifröst University. So we can say 5 universities are using this evaluation system. And it is important that this evaluation system that was originally initiated around the turn of the century, just prior to that, has been under revision. So it is currently being revised, and actually the revision has been prepared for several years now. We had both an internal committee here at the University of Iceland that discussed this. We had also a scientific committee for the public universities that reviewed it. Then we had an outside assessment committee that gave its review a few years back. And then we have a specific committee now for the that is appointed by the public universities, led by the Pro-Rector of Science here at the University of Iceland, that is proposing changes. And this will be discussed by the leadership and also within the community. So this is ongoing. And I also would like to reflect that on the fact that this evaluation system, when it was introduced, it was also a part of the universities, I would say, and in particular University of Iceland, turning from an undergraduate institution into a research university. And I believe the system played a role, because at that time, we were sort of in this transition. It was not clear for many academic faculty that research was a part of their job. Although it was defined like that, they sort of practiced it differently. I'm not saying everybody, but there were some cases of that. So by introducing an evaluation system, which is personal, I would like to say it's for each individual staff member, it became clear that the universities regarded the research as an important part of the job of the faculty members. I'm not saying this system is perfect in any way, but it has its advantages, we can say. And some advantages include that it is transparent. It has many different indicators, not only publications. It has, or I would say, ISI or Scopus publications, but it evaluates the performance of researchers and faculty members in, we can say, many different ways. And it is very important, I would say, high impact publications in the system. But we have been sort of, I would say, changing it through the years gradually, but there was sort of a major change being made about 8 years ago or something like that, when we sort of tried to fine-tune it, and in many ways that was successful, I would say. But we have also tried to have it more thorough, to include not only publications, but evaluate both service, social engagement, and social engagement is something that is now being looked at by the group that is revising the system. But I would say the transparency, especially in terms of publications, is important for the researchers. So it is clear what counts. But on the other hand, we can also say that the simplicity of the system, I would say that is an advantage too. As Frank mentions, and I think Gunnar agrees, that impact and journals, that is not the only thing, and I totally agree. I mean, it is something that we should not only focus on, but in the system we were sort of, or as it was designed and as it was modified, we were trying to sort of push people into sort of more competitive areas of publications. But it is not only international publications that are counted in the system, but also domestic publications. So it is not as simple as I think people have been sort of discussing it. One thing also, I say it's a personal system. It is not used in providing budget from the government. The system is not used like that. The universities use their own budget to provide support for faculty members if they are performing well, and that is according to a specific pool that is distributed every year. But the University of Iceland, I can say that uses the allocation to the faculties based on the system. So it counts the research points, which again are not the only points in the system, because we have service, we have also teaching and so forth, in distribution to the faculties. I would also like to mention that we have reviews of faculty members when they are requesting evaluation for promotion, as mentioned here previously in the discussion. That is something we do. We also have several ways of evaluating our faculty members, but we don't use the system unless I can say for the distribution of funding to evaluate how well our faculties or research groups are doing. So obviously, as mentioned, peer review is important there, and the quality board has been asking the schools now in QEF2 to evaluate research management at the universities, and that is in their self-assessments, and now the universities are being evaluated by the quality board in assessment as a whole. And our University of Iceland just went through an evaluation like that. So the research assessment covers this, or the assessment of the quality board, and we are looking forward to continuing on that route. So again, I would say the system has its advantages. It also has its disadvantages. We are trying to sort of even out the disadvantages, but I would like to point out my final point, because it was mentioned between different fields, the evaluation of such systems can be uneven. I would like to point out for our 5 schools at the University of Iceland, and we have social sciences, humanities, education, health sciences, and engineering and natural sciences, 5 schools. We are seeing that the average performance of them for the faculty members are fairly even. So we can say in one way the system sort of counts research points across the different fields in a similar way. I'm not saying it's correct, but it's one indication of that they are there is something in the system that appeals for all schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jon Atli. And I would like to repeat once more that this webinar is organized and offered by the REAC, which is the advisory body to the quality board, and there are representatives of all the universities of Iceland and stakeholders of research evaluation. So this is also very important for us in the quality board. These discussions will be very important for us too. So Ragnhildur, please, your first reactions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you to the speakers, the presenters. These were thought-provoking and excellent discussions, and I have a lot of questions that I would like to pose. But first, a number of things. I have, from the beginning of research evaluations at Reykjavik University, been part of that. And the system there is slightly different from the system at the public universities, but I have experience with that one as well, since I was a member of the promotion committee at the University of Akureyri for 3 or 4 years. So there we worked with that system as well. The Reykjavik University system, like Jon Atli also mentioned, I mean, it has been under revision. It is not perfect, but it does a number of things, and we are always reevaluating and always thinking about it. First of all, it arose from the experience of many teachers at the university level that grading people's efforts are easy if the scale is broad enough. It's relatively easy to grade a paper as an A, B, or C. It's much harder on the 10 scale that we use in Iceland to say if it's a paper that should receive a 7.5 or an 8. So the thought originally was that even across widely varying disciplines, such as law and computer science, that we should be able to reach consensus on this is an outstanding research. This is outstanding research output for the past 5 years. This is decent. This is really something that leaves something to be desired. And the system sprung from this, and it involves an international committee distanced from everyone and everything at the university, evaluating each faculty member on a scale from 0 to 4. So 4 is an internationally acknowledged, very prolific academic. The aim for a lot of people is to be 2 or between 2 and 3, somewhere there. The goal that this should be relatively uncontroversial, that worked. But we see that as the university gets older and as there are more very active academics, there is pressure to be more specific, and there's also more competition between researchers, because let me tell you that this is used only to divide money between departments, not to determine any rights or duties of individual researchers. The reason for that is relatively simple. This is an evaluation, it's a guideline, but we cannot and do not want to make it really a key metric for the salary, rights, or anything else of the individual staff member. We believe this holds true at the department level, but there can be discrepancies concerning individuals. Part of this is also that I followed as a young academic the introduction of the public system and saw the effect that it had on women academics. And I think that it just really matters to remove all arbitrariness to the extent possible if we are really going to be making decisions that concerning individuals. But so that's the evaluation system is mostly for internal purposes. And I mean, the problems that we have seen are primarily that this is very slow to change. We can all imagine this. If you are called to sit on an international panel to evaluate somebody who is outside your field and you see that last year that person was a 3 or that person's effort was awarded a 3, you're not going to say, no, I really don't think so. So there's a slowness built in. But the good thing and what makes this worthwhile in the view of most academics here is that it avoids a discipline war, because it's not necessary to evaluate whether a book chapter in law or a monograph in law is really equivalent to a conference poster in some other field, to an opera or to anything else. What is done is that this international panel evaluates compared to people in that field in other countries. So lawyers are being compared with lawyers, computer scientists with computer scientists, etc. But as I say, this is under revision. It has definite advantages. It also has drawbacks, and we are always sort of looking at how to work with this really. What I think we need to think about, and I'm very grateful for this discussion that has taken place in the last few semesters, is that there are many different ways to be a good academic and that metrics really, really work. The evaluation system at Reykjavik University was introduced in 2007, and the trajectory of research output also evaluated on basically any scale, including the public one, is the trajectory is directly upwards. So it really matters, and it therefore really matters that the metrics and that the evaluation that we have is that it supports what we want to do, our mission and our strategy, just like somebody said. So those were sort of my first thoughts and my introduction. And if I were allowed to throw in a couple of questions, maybe the first one would be to ask for a little bit more discussion on impact, because I truly like the arts approach to the different impact of first the things that we do, and secondly research on the things that we do. Thank you.
Thank you. And please, colleagues, you can ask questions in the chat. I'll take them later. Don't forget. So now we'll continue there is one hand up, but maybe I take a bit late. Or is it directly to these presentations? Schooley, you had hand.
I was just applauding.
It was applause. Oh, thank you. I thought you would like to say something. Yes. So we have prepared 3 question areas for the discussion, but we don't have to follow them directly if you have better questions. So the first one was how do we characterize research output across the academic disciplines? And how do we define impact across the different academic disciplines? The second one was how can we capture the impact of research beyond academia on the economy, society, policy, quality of life, and so on. And the last one, very much discussed, can we balance quantitative metrics and qualitative narratives in evaluating research? So these are the three question areas. And I would like to start with the question which has already been discussed, but maybe you would like to comment more, that it's one of the most common issues criticized, I think, in research evaluation is that it emphasizes quantity. and researchers would like to have more quality approach, but when the discussion goes further, rises the question how to measure research output qualitatively. Any answers from our panelists? Frank, please. You are muted.
For the comments from the Icelandic participants from in the panel, I think the discussion about impact, and I think that is what I said also in my talk, and what we also were doing in the strategic evaluation protocol, which is now a national protocol for evaluation of units and departments, is so we did not try to make a list of what impact could be, because it's completely different for computer sciences and for artistics and for chemistry and for me being an infectious disease person, for instance. And these impacts, scientific impacts, are different. But of course, you can imagine that impacts in society, for instance, my research, HIV/AIDS research, had a completely different impact outside of academia, in the people who were living with HIV/AIDS, who were desperate to get away, to stay away from HIV infections. And so I think that is very much, context dependent. So it's very much dependent on the context of your research. Even in law or in social sciences, these contexts can change immensely from the one corridor to the other in your department. And they have to say themselves what they are aiming for and what for them counts as impact, like in the arts. And so therefore, and we have to acknowledge that is, people say, well, that will be very subjective, not for peers. Real peers know and that's very transparent as well. They can explain why they think something has a high impact and has a 5. Is that a 5, the high, or is it 10 a high? I don't know. An Icelandic high figure. So I think that in that respect, and this is of course what people find very difficult, because is it then not objective anymore, and how can you compare? Mm-hmm. Well, I think if the peers say this is a top peer in our field, that is something you can compare. Then you can compare what a chemist does and what a chemical engineering does, or an artist. And with comparing those in absolute sense, that's of course, that's not very helpful. But I think we agree on that. And the other thing which I want to say, of course, if you start this type of evaluations and you use metrics, and metrics are related to papers, then in all countries, as soon as people started to say look for papers, you know what happened? In every country, people started to produce papers like crazy, because that was what counts. But is that real impact? I leave that question to the panel.
Yeah. One question also on papers and this context dependencies, that there are, or are there fields that are more international and fields that are more domestic? So usually these models emphasize publication in high-level top international journals, and maybe there are other fields that were, or disciplines which are primarily domestic. Paula, do you have any comments?
Well, perhaps not so much about that, but I certainly agree on what Frank was saying about papers, that it's people rustle up papers quite quickly. But if you're never working with papers, if that's not part of your practice or your research methodology in any, you suddenly become excluded. I mean, one of the things I was trying to point out was that the arts have the possibility of providing a greater impact for also more research than just artistic research. But we don't use papers to publish them. We do it on the stage, or we make there's something. And if you think about the pandemic, what we've not had is a lot of culture. And if you think about how much that's influenced how we've lived for this last year, then we've really missed these things that are to do with challenging us, going out, seeing theatre, participating in exhibitions, doing all those kind of things. We've missed that. And somehow or other, the systems need, if we're going to have systems, they need to be more inclusive of different ways into them that's not reliant on text-based stuff.
Mhm.
And I think that maybe there are lots of things that you can compare, but I really, you know, I feel excluded a lot of the time because the systems have been so established for a long time by people who become safe in the systems. And I think we should be doing what we're doing now, which is questioning them really. What's a good way forward for all of us? And I'd like a voice in those questionings as well. You know, the arts have got a really good space to really be saying, what's this really about?
Yeah, Ragnhildur, please.
Thank you. Very briefly, I think that the question that you raised on domestic and international outlets in law, that really comes to the crux of the matter, because frankly, you can almost publish anything at all about domestic law in international journals, because there are rarely readers except from that country, and they are often so general that it doesn't matter, and they are not used domestically and do not have impact. This is true, or at least this is what legal researchers in all the Nordics say.
Yeah.
So then you have really a metric system pushing you in a direction that arguably pushes you in a direction away from quality, impactful research in that field. This may be complaining to some degree, but this is, I mean, it is certainly the experience of a lot of people that especially curiosities such as specific small jurisdictions like the Nordics can get published in a lot of places without having the same impact. So that this is just one example of where quantity and quality and looking at the traditional metrics may have the opposite effect from what's intended.
Okay, Natalie, please.
Yes, thank you very much. This is a really complicated matter, but I mean, regarding the impact journals, and I agree that we should not only look at the impact factor and things like this. So I'm very much there, but obviously for researchers to get their papers published in a peer-reviewed high impact journal is often an achievement, and we shouldn't discount that. So it's a complicated issue, and what Ragnhildur brings up here regarding law, I'm not going to go into that field specifically, but we have to always think about the domestic market also. And some of our research is very close to the society, and the universities have an important component there, because we are for our societies, although we want also to be international, and we have to be international in order to be competitive. So there is really a friction there. So in our evaluation system, what we do is that we also look at the material published in Icelandic, and including books in fields that are not that international. So we try to even this out, but systems like this, they are never perfect. We have to remember that. And peer review systems are also not perfect. So we have to just realize that we are all trying to do the best for our institutions, but we will never find the perfect system. Thank you.
Gunnar, please.
I agree also with Jonathan's last comment. But I want to talk first about the opposition between domestic and international publishing and high-level journal publishing, and then talk more about afterwards about how to cover societal impact. So, because both issues were raised now. I think the opposition between domestic and international journal publishing is not a big problem in the Nordic countries. And it's neither in the Netherlands, where the evaluation protocol says that in the social science and humanities, books and domestic publications should also be included. It depends on the field of research, it says. In the Nordic countries, we even have systems for documentation of this. They don't have this in Netherlands. So Denmark, Finland, and Norway, we have nationwide systems that include domestic publications, for example, all types of publications in law. And we also have instructions to include them in evaluations. And we just had an evaluation of legal research in Norway with an international panel, and they could use data also for even for domestic publications with a societal outreach.
Okay.
And I think you have solved it in Iceland as well. So of course, in those fields where it really matters to be part of the strongest international communities in research, it's not about the impact factors. That's not so interesting in itself. It's about being there and participating, contributing, learning, collaborating. So the core journals are important, just as domestic publishing is important in law, in Icelandic studies, in history, and so on. I think we have a larger problem with covering what is called often societal impact, but I like better the term societal interaction, because most often it's not about research that has an impact outside in society. This impact is created in collaboration. Like in most professional studies, the collaboration with the societal practice is already there, like in medicine, like in law, and so on. And also in other fields. I mean, social sciences, we produce reports. They are often commissioned externally, and they are produced in collaboration. The problem is how to document and measure this. And this problem makes it difficult to count the activities. And perhaps we should like that. Societal interaction perhaps needs to be understood. It should provide an overview. And the way they have solved this in the UK with the societal impact narrative cases is that they let the researchers be responsible at the university to tell the story about how this piece of research had an impact in society. I don't really think that's an available method, and it's successful in claiming to policymakers that research really makes a difference. That's its success. But as a documentation of societal impact interaction, I'm not so sure that it works. Also because societal interaction is part of the obligations of research institutions. It's part of their mandate. And so we also need to make an institutional responsibility and to look how the interaction works on the organizational level. And I think both sides of the interaction can learn from that. Now, this interaction, as pointed out, will be different from field to field. So in artistic research or artistic work, the interaction will be in the culture sector. And then in educational research, the interaction should be with the school system, and so on. You can go on. I think it would be really worthwhile for society, and not only for us, if we could develop better methods for societal interaction evaluation at the organizational level.
Okay.
Not just look for outputs and to count them.
Yeah, thank you. I can see that there is a hand up from the audience, but please could you use the chat because it's better for the organization of this webinar. And I'll take now a couple of questions from the chat. There is a direct question to Frank. Can you say a few words on Utrecht abandoning the impact factor in its evaluations? Have you decided what role evaluations will have in the development of your university and how they are going to be carried out? Are they going to be formative? Please, Frank.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Say we came to the conclusion, but not only we, but with DORA, which has already started in the United States in 2012, that say focusing on high impact journals is very dangerous, because I can tell you I played the game myself, and I know how to get a paper in Nature and Science, but they were not my best papers. But they were at that time sexy. It was hype, and we knew how to play the game. So this sounds completely unacademic, but this is how people play the game to survive. And so, but not only this, but this, so people in general, also the Science Europe with all the funders, and also in the European community, people decided to go and to leave the venue of publication. So where is your publication coming out, which publisher, to leave that behind and go for content. And this was also happening in the country. So it's not only Utrecht, but this is happening to all our 14 universities who are there. And so, and this is a huge, say, system, of course, for the whole country. And we decided to go for that. And we are front runner, but we are not alone. Everybody is doing the same in every university as we speak. So this is also for Technical University, Delft, Eindhoven, Amsterdam University, Leiden. Everybody's going in this direction. This is also the direction where the ERC Council is going. So your top candidates, they will say, well, I need my Nature and Science papers, although I know it's a poor proxy. I need them because the ERC Council is counting them. No, not anymore. And of course, in the committees, people will still look at that type of output, but they know they cannot argue with it. So they have to argue based on content. And this is, of course, what we also now doing in Holland. This is so what we have been hearing in the panel. This is extremely difficult because we are totally addicted to high GIF papers. I was totally addicted to getting papers in Nature and Science because that brought me my professorship in Amsterdam. That was really, if you had a few of these papers, you couldn't be denied anymore. And this, of course, this is of course now changing, and people are realizing that this is not good, and it's also unfair because there's a lot of fields where you never get in that type of journals. And I will give again. I will shut up after this. I will say again: if you do in the medical center, there are fields which are never getting into high journal impact factors. They never get Nature, Science, and Cell, and still they have to compete for monies with molecular biology, fMRI. Say genetics, the fields where normally people publish top stuff in Nature Science, Nature Genetics, Nature Immunology, and what have you. And so, and that is an unfairness in the system that we try to pass and to leave behind. And of course, people in every university have seen that type of unfairness, and hopefully deans can correct and rectors can correct. But sometimes, of course, in committees, it's very difficult to correct because we are not there. The doors are closed. And this is the way we do it. And we use the evaluation basically as what I put in the chat, which is the strategic evaluation protocol for units, but you can also go in that direction for, say, individual, say, evaluations, which has also been published in Nature, by the way, high impact. We published our protocols in Nature 5 years ago, and we use it already for 5 years. And again, people find it difficult. It's a change of culture. But this is really what we want. We want to have teams. We want to judge teams and not so much individuals. Individuals belong to teams. We want to really go to something different because we think this is increasing the impact, and also engaging the public in your research is engaging the impact of your research. And this can also be locally, regional, national, international, what have you. This is. They are going to be very formative. So we are really looking at your plans, at what is the team intended to do, what are the goals you want to achieve, etc., etc. So we also very much forward-looking. Is that enough?
Yeah. Okay.
And you can see how difficult it is how I talk about it, because this needs a lot of energy to change that type of systems.
Yeah. There was also a question about teaching, but of course today we are we are concentrating on evaluation of research, but maybe if I reformulate it a bit, of course, one of the important impacts of research comes through our graduates and higher education, research-based teaching and learning, and so on. How should, or could we, or should we take this into account in research evaluation?
Is that for me as well? Yeah, I think in Utrecht we do.
Anybody?
In Utrecht we definitely do, but we talk now about research, but of course education is a major issue also in evaluation.
Yeah, okay. And now there is Jan Olofsson's question to Gunnar. He would like to hear more about the use of metrics vis-a-vis other approaches in evaluating or rewarding academic achievements or success. Can you see it, Gunnar, in the chat?
Yes, I could
Yeah,
see. Thank
okay,
you.
yeah.
Yes, it's correctly understood. I mean, metrics is not sufficient. Metrics should also be relevant. If you evaluate individuals or if you evaluate individual articles, just as Frank just said, the impact factor of journals is not relevant anyways. Because it's only about the average citation rate of the journal. But it depends on the purpose of the evaluation. If in the context of external funding for individuals or new positions and so on, of course you need more information than metrics can provide. So that's my and then I distinguish between national funding allocation systems that can be indicator based, and they are simple and they are transparent, just as Jon Atle said. That's a good feature, but you should not regard these systems as evaluation. They do not bring you forward. They only count what you did in more or less legitimate ways for the resource allocation. Then I want to return to the question of impact factors. Yes, I agree with Frank. Most funders in Europe agree and also do it locally, turn away from impact factors. They signed the DORA declaration. This is not the way to evaluate research. And also, but we have come in a special situation now, because with the good advent of open access publishing, the big publishers have been installing article processes charges, while at the same time keeping their subscription revenues. And I calculated that only last year, the 10 major publishers of journals collected $3.6 billion from APC. And it's some years ago, we had a discussion that there might be too many research publications globally, but now the total number is increasing at a very high rate. And several new journals and publishers have dubious procedures, questionable journals have been introduced, also by the major respected publishers. And so we need journal evaluation now. So we need to, but that's separate from evaluating articles and individuals, but we really need journal evaluation. And in some way, the impact factors have to come back for that purpose, because, or perhaps even more advanced ways of measuring the importance and qualities of journals. When we take away subscriptions, we're not sure there's a market that really wants or needs this journal. So the consequences of the transition to open access now are becoming clear. We also have new problems. And I think there will be more and more talk about journal evaluation in the coming years. I'm sorry to say.
Any comments from the other panelists on journal evaluation? Paula.
Yeah. Well, of course, I'm not talking. Well, there are some artistic journals as well, but they're not on that kind of level. But certainly years ago, when I was trying to work with Kristin in Norway, we were trying to work out, well, what could be the equivalent of the most important journals. So is it the theatre in the National Theatre in Bergen? Is it the National Theatre in Oslo? Is it somewhere else in Portugal, or is it in New York? Where is it that you can, kind of make a ranking of some equivalent journals in somewhere? And the trouble is that these things change. If you're going to have an exhibition, is it better to have it in the Museum of Modern Art in New York or in the shopping center in your local town? So you're doing that all the time about things, and it's trying to work out where is it that has the impact. And that's kind of my take on looking at journal evaluation. It's something that we were trying to work with at the time, and it just proved quite impossible in a funny way, because the field changes, because certainly in the arts, everything changes all the time. And there's another thing I just say, talking about international, certainly the arts in Iceland are very international, just to start off with. So while I know there's a lot of local stuff going on, then everything becomes international straight away. So that's also an interesting space to be in.
Yeah, Natalie, please.
Thank you. A very interesting discussion. And this point regarding the metrics and the journal evaluation Gunnar mentions, and I agree with Paula about the art in Iceland. It's, I mean, we're doing very well there for sure, but that's not my field here to discuss. But we're very proud of our accomplishments there. I would like to say this is again a very complicated problem, but I mean that's what we need to address. I embrace the open access movement, but not in the way, as Gunnar mentions, the way it's run by just turning it around, that the customer pays now to get it published. And I mean, the system, I would say, is rigged in many ways. And this has, as Gunnar says, created many problems, as I see it. And I can say I come from the other side here also. I have been editor-in-chief for a very important journal for 6 years, and I'm still on 6 editorial boards of international journals, and I enjoy it very much to sort of ask people to review and interact regarding special issues and so forth. And I think the journals are extremely important. In an ideal world, it would be good just to put a paper on a web page and people will just comment on it. But some authors like to do it there, but we are not there. So the journals are extremely important, and if they are well known and prestigious, and I would assume that is what Gunnar means by looking at their quality and evaluate that. It is important to publish there, and whether you like citations or not, on the average, there will be more citations to those journals, but it doesn't mean for all the papers. When we are talking about the impact of authors, I mean, they can be 1 out of 300 authors, but they still count these publications as their publications. And that is one of the problems we look at. What is the contribution also of individual authors? But I would like to say that we have a major problem with the system as it is. The journals make a lot of money. Some of them, we can say, are important in the sense that it's not just publication houses as is. It can be societies that are also the professional societies that are important for the fields. So again, it's a very complicated problem, but I really don't like the open access situation as it is, but I totally support open science, and that's the way to go. But we have to find good ways in the sense that we don't need to fund it, I mean, as we have been doing. So I don't have a solution, but it is not working as is.
Frank, please. Microphone.
I have to confess that I'm an ambassador of Coalition S. And you all know Plan S, and you're referring, I think, to John Alter, you're probably referring to Plan S and the APC transition.
Mm-hmm.
And say, I can tell you that from the beginning, I agree completely with you and also with the previous speakers that paying extra for APCs is really, that's really not smart. And this is euphemistically saying that something is stupid. And that really we are paying extra. And this is, of course, what has been showing, the 3 billion extra in the system, which is paid by authors or funders and the real problem there is also, and Coalition S is now really on, on the trajectory to go beyond APCs. So that's good news for all of us. So we want to go to open access, which is really open access and not paying APCs, because many researchers and institutions in Africa, South America, also in East Europe, they simply cannot pay. They cannot pay to get their publications into these journals. So what we had in the beginning, that we were publishing behind paywalls in very expensive journals, which people couldn't read in Africa. But now we also try to prevent them from publishing their stuff in those journals, which is, of course, that's a double misery. And so people realize now. So for everybody in the room and who's listening, people realize now also in Coalition S that we have to go beyond APC, and we are working on that. And then, of course, you have to think. And of course, the discussion is, are journals really catering to community of scientists, or are they just commercial publishing houses who are making a 30 to 40% margin on their, costs? And the last, I have to say, the last is, of course, the case. And of course, they try to adapt, and they have to, and they even Lancet, which is, of course, one of my favorite journals, they try to convince us that we need Lancet to think about what type of science we have to do. Come on, are you kidding? Are you kidding? I think that we can do that ourselves. We have our own communities, and we don't need, young editorial postdocs to say what type of research is hot. We know it, and we know it because we tell them, and they tell us again. So I think that there's something that we really need to think and rethink about journals. What are they good for, and why are they so expensive? Because if you now want to publish a paper, also from Iceland, I warn you, if you want to publish a paper in Nature, you have to pay, and you already have your subscription, Iceland University, then you have to pay 10,000 euros per paper APC to get a paper in Nature. Are you going to pay for that, or are you going to say to your elite scientists, no, guys, girls, we're not going to pay that extra money? What are you going to do? You're the boss.
Okay, there is a question in the chat. It's to everybody, but maybe to Frank. Considering open science and forward-looking approaches when developing research evaluation, how would you relate this to the historical or societal environmental purpose of the universities? Any thoughts? No. Anybody else?
I have.
Okay, Gunnar, please.
It's a good question from Skuli. Universities are, in a way, the most open place you can go in society. And society is used to sending their students and also to visit universities themselves, and also university libraries. They are free to enter, they are open, and it's always been, researchers have always historically been proud of sharing information with society. And this is history. In addition, in modern times or recent times, it's also been officially mandated in the law for universities. So open science in that sense is not something new. And I think every aspect of open science sounds good, but taking the experiences so far with open access publishing and some of the problems that we have run into, I wish that the speed for going further, which is largely moved forward by the libraries, because they need new purposes for their work to go right into open data and all other aspects. I'm waiting for a critical discussion, not against open science, but how to proceed. Because we have seen already now that academic communities have been put aside and not asked for advice in the process. It seemed 3 years ago that the publishing industry was against open access. Now they are really asking us to go open. And our governments are asking to go open, and our libraries are asking to go open. And I think the academic communities need to be listened to if we hesitate a bit and want critical discussions that we are used to. But as I said, I like all aspects of open science, and it would serve science well. But we need to discuss the methods with which we go there. So I'm a bit more I'm a bit more confused than I was a year ago when I see the directions of things are going.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Very quickly. So,
Yes.
so do you think, Gunnar, do you think that so people say we have to own the pipes, so we have to own the journals again, which was of course the idea also of the communities that are publishing, like the chemists and so do you think that we
Yes.
should own the pipes again?
Exactly. And I think the way Jon Atle described his editorial experiences and also how he adjoins it, of course, his journals are our journals.
Right.
They are our research infrastructure. We
Yeah.
have not completed a research project before we publish. And
Yeah.
the evaluation of what we have done in our projects happens in the journals. They are our, except that we don't own them legally.
Anymore.
I think the problems that are coming up now really show us this. These good publishers, they are good in their services.
Yeah.
They should providing the services to our journals. What is wrong here is that they own them.
Right.
That's
Okay.
the wrong thing.
Then we agree completely on this, all of us in the room, I guess.
Yes.
So we have to, and this is the next action. We have to own the pipes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also from Iceland.
Ragnhildur and Jon Atle have their hands up also. Please, Ragnhildur.
Thank you. I wanted to take a step back because even though it is easy to get really, really mad thinking about the open access journals that are really money-making machines to a degree on taxpayers' money, it is, then what we need to think about, I believe, is the open access to information and including scientific information. And to answer Skule, I think it relates excellently to the historic role of universities and to the role of universities to be, and the arts and arts universities to be really a pillar in democracy and democratic debate. And in the age of misinformation that we are, I think it's really a societal duty to put correct information out there through whatever means it will get through to people. So I think that we really should think about this in that context.
Jon Atle, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just totally agree with Ragnhildur here. Just I would like to add to what I said before regarding the journals, since I've been in this publication business from the other side, although I have never made any money from it. It's not like that, but my society was very much into it, and they were afraid of this open science movement and so forth. So they went open access with one of their journals, and they believed they might lose from it, but they have never made as much money. So that's based on the publication, or APCs as you call it. So, I mean, that just goes to show how it works. But Luca here is asking me regarding would you support academics if they decided to start a journal that is open access and would be free? I'm very much for it, but it always it depends on how much. I cannot decide beforehand, but we always have to think about the good journals. They have strong structure. They have publication documents in the way they have their rules and so forth, and they tell the associate editors how they should behave. They tell the editor-in-chief how he or she should behave and so forth. So there are rules, and this structure is traditional in a way, and it may be difficult in the community to go there. But if people can do that and can build up respect and so forth for the journal, that is very good. And the question is, would that be supported in our system? I can say yes, but how much? That's also the question. We would certainly give this initiative something, both I would believe supported in a way financially, but also supported through our evaluations. But again, the devil is in the details how that is done. But I think this is the way forward. But I mean, to build up the respect, it's very difficult.
Okay, there is a question to our both Icelandic rectors in the chat also. Having heard today the discussion and comments and answers, would you carry on using your evaluating system, or if yes, is it anything particularly you would like to change or address and enhance? And maybe I could add to this a bit to make it even more a bit more general, that the Icelandic quality system is strongly enhancement oriented. And how could we balance accountability and enhancement in research evaluation? And of course, the international experts are free to comment, but maybe if you, Natli, could start.
Okay, thank you very much. I can assure you that we will continue to use our system, and we are refining it. And there are a number of ways that we are working on in refining it, including more social engagement and so forth, trying to be fair in our evaluation of the researchers and the faculty. We are also, since it's not a part of this, but Celia asked about the teaching, we are also looking at ways to evaluate performance in teaching, performing a teaching academy and so forth. And that is very important because there has to be a holistic view of the performance of the individual faculty members. So, I mean, we are trying to even out some discrepancies and problems with the system, but we will continue to use it for sure.
Ragnhildur, would you like to add anything to this?
Just along the same lines, I think that everybody is very aware that this is a hard task, that, as has been said a number of times, no system is perfect. We do try our best to make sure that there is no bias that is really detrimental to one field or another, and maybe we do not always do a good enough job of that. And now I'm thinking about the Icelandic higher education system in general. And I think that the enhancement-led work going on at the national level is really helpful and really necessary. And I would like to keep that up because it's more reflective, and it's also based on the info we get that way that we can adjust and think about how other systems should be. So with those additions, I could almost say the same thing as Jónatli. Do we think things are perfect? Absolutely not. do we want to, and do we think it's important to keep evaluating? Yes, so then we keep going.
Do you think that the new research information system, the pure ERIS, will change a lot in Iceland?
I think it may change a lot, but I think we also need to be a bit careful that a system and the ways decisions are made about how things are entered into the system, how things are classified, etc., not make judgments for us.
Okay. I have one last question. It's a bit personal question to all our panelists. How would you like your own research to be evaluated? It's a complicated question, but I would appreciate short answers. Please, who would like to start?
Shall I start?
Yes, please.
So I love this question because this is exactly the question that we asked to a group of 15 or 20 young careers, academics, young professors from all fields in my medical center. And that was happening in 2015. And we asked them, we were in the middle of the discussion exactly as we had it now. People were not happy with how it was being done, counting the papers. And so we asked the committee of professors, young career postdocs, people who were in totally different fields, from basic science to clinical science. We asked them, how in general do you want to be, say, judged? And they took 9 months, and they came up with a very generic, say, set of indicators, which I didn't show because I only had 10 minutes. But these indicators look very much like what was also on my slide. Like, you know, it's also about education, but for research, it was also about, say, how do you get your problem? Are you aware of where you are as an academic, related to the people you think you work for? In our case, many cases, of course, patients. And so we had a set of these indicators, and I can show them. I will show them in the chat after this. And they came up with a very generic proposal, and it was a scheme that could be used by orthopedians, by surgeons, by cardiologists, by computer scientists, by social scientists. It could be used across the whole university eventually, because it was generic, and it could be, say, linked to specific contexts, because, say, having impact would be something completely different for psychiatry or for basic neurologists working in the laboratory or in the mouse model. And this, we adapted that, and so we left it that as the board. We were very, say, pleased with it, and now people are using it for 5-6 years, and we are practicing. We are practicing how to use this type of, say, pluriformity and uncertainty for many people. And of course, there are still papers, and it's still about grants, but it's also about all these other things. And these people themselves came up with such a scheme. And so I loved it. But in the beginning, we were very, say, nervous about it, because the people in my board, the chair and the third member, we were just sort of, what are they going to do? But this was wonderful, because everybody could use it, and could use it in his own context. It's so extremely context dependent, even in one medical center. Compare, say, people who work on stroke, mobility, learning people to speak again, cognitive, and also the development of stroke, which is very basic science. They work in one department, but there's totally different contexts, totally different. So I love this question, and this is how I want to be judged. That I want to have generic, say, indicators that I can show to people. This is for my field, for my topic, for my strategy, the real strong indicators that I want to use, 5, 6, or whatever. Yeah, so this is the real question that every rector, vice chancellor should ask to his departments. How do you want to be judged? Because I cannot tell it, you can tell it yourself. And it's a discussion with peers, of course, mind you, it's a discussion with peers, international. And now I stop.
Okay, I think Gunnar has his hand up, but I think this is a very good comment to end, to finish this discussion. And I'd like to thank all the panelists, or maybe give the final words to our chair of the Icelandic Rectors Conference, Jon Atli, please.
Oh, thank you. You don't want me to address this question, or?
Please, please.
Okay. Just thinking about it. I mean, what I would like is to have some transparency and have some fair system of doing it. I can tell you, I got my promotion here, what, 25 years ago to professor. I mean, wow, time flies. But nobody knew anything about my field here. I mean, just very broad lines, and that is some of the problems we are facing in a small country. Okay, you can always have these external evaluators and so forth, but I mean, for example, if you would like to ask them to evaluate me now, they are all my friends. I mean, they are all disqualified. So it is always a problem to evaluate. And Frank mentions 5-6 indicators. In my field, I mean, we have to go to the publications. I mean, that's the only way. And the research grants and activities, editorial experience and networking and so forth. Okay, you can go there, but it comes so much down to just counting. And for us here in Iceland, we are few. We need obviously international contacts, and that always helps. And we have built our system on influence of international contacts, and that's very, very important. And for example, I praised REAC and the quality board of just working with us, because we need expertise. But I think this is not a simple problem. So in a way, I don't have any solution, but I think it needs to be simple and transparent, just to get the broad lines, and then you can have a review to look at the performance in a more closer view. Just as final comment, I just would like to thank you everyone for participating in this discussion. Again, it is very, very important for us to continue discussing this. It's a complicated problem. We want our system to excel, I would say. We want to be competitive. We want to do better. And all input in doing that is important. And again, I embrace open science. I embrace quality, but I also embrace transparency and simplicity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now it's time to wrap up the discussions of today, and it will be done by the chair of the REAC, Philip Wynne. Phil, the mic is yours, please. You are muted, Phil.
No, I'm not. Thank you, Rita. And I would like to start by reiterating my thanks to all of the international panel members, the Icelandic members of the panel, to Rita for agreeing to chair this, to Sigurður Óli Sigurdsson for doing so much of the behind-the-scenes work with this, and to my colleagues on the subcommittee of REAC who put this program together. I think we've done a good job with this. What we've been faced with here are genuinely complicated problems. We all clearly recognize that. But I think that by having this webinar, we are pushing ourselves to use international experience to help the evolution of systems in Icelandic higher education that will work for Icelandic higher education. And I love the word that John Attlee just used, excel. We need to help the system excel. I've been taking notes through this because I will prepare a document for further discussion within Iceland about the contents of this webinar. And gee whiz, all sorts of thoughts go across my mind when I look at this sort of thing. Just to think about the three international speakers, I love the idea that Frank presented of rethinking recognition and reward. I think that is a really fundamental point that we need to hang on to. Recognition and reward, not just for individuals, but for institutions as well. I love the idea of open science, and one can argue about the directions that might take and the forms it might take. But using open science to help us develop better ways of evaluation, I think is critically important. I loved also Gunnar's talk and this discrimination between formative and summative assessments. I see the benefits and merits in both of those approaches, and it was interesting as Gunnar was unpacking some of those ideas about formative assessments, evaluations not directly connected to funding, but evaluations that help one evolve. It struck me how well suited that is to what we have in Iceland on the quality board, which has been mostly focused on learning and teaching, but is driven by an evaluation-led approach. So the Research Evaluation Advisory Committee, the subcommittee of the quality board, loves that idea of enhancement-led, of thinking of forming better ways of doing what we do. I think that's really important. Paula's talk I thought was just brilliant. The notion of the arts that we make, rather than theories and histories of artistic endeavor, which are hugely important. But in the context of Iceland, I'm very well aware from my contacts at the Icelandic University of the Arts how important arts practice is to Icelandic higher education. The interesting thing I felt with that, though, to some extent, is that when Paula was talking about the aims of evaluation, there are a number of points that come into that, things that go into the mix about the use of taxpayers' money, promotion and recruitment, developing strengths and qualities within a university. There's competition between universities, which we have to see as a good thing. It helps us improve all the time. Research evaluation and doctoral training. Doctoral training, I think, is hugely important in this. The other important part, I think, about Paula's bringing arts practice into this is this. We spent a lot of time during this session talking about journal articles and publishing models and open access and all of these sorts of things. But one of the things that we've tried to think through on the Research Evaluation Committee is not so much about journal articles, but about research outputs, because research outputs differ greatly across different sorts of disciplines. A lot of the outputs, of course, are journal publications, but there are all sorts of other things that get thrown into that mix as well, not just artistic practice, but people writing computer code, people developing things that aren't simply captured easily in a journal article. Some disciplines, I'm well aware that in computer science, it's not a journal article that's so important as a conference abstract. So all the time, one needs to contextualize whatever one's doing in evaluation of research within the disciplines and use the strengths of the disciplines and the peer assessment within the disciplines to make sure that one's doing research evaluation properly and appropriately for that discipline. The other interesting thing, so many of you brought up the issue of societal impact, whatever we want to call it. But that clearly is something that is very important and is running through systems internationally. I was terribly pleased because I'm from the UK. I've worked through the research assessment exercise and the research excellence framework since I was a child, it seems. It's such a part of my life. And was involved in preparation of my own institution for the last submission just earlier this year. The UK narrative cases for impact, the social impact of research, I think have a great deal of merit. But I think Gunnar is right that it's not the whole answer to this. And what one has to get to grips with, I think, through a lot of what we've talked about is cultural change. It's changing the way that we think about what we do, changing the way that we valorize the research outputs that we have, the social impacts that we have, whether we're doing things that are primarily focused domestically or internationally. All of this involves thinking about how we think about ourselves, how we think about the cultures of research across all of our disciplines. Clearly, huge amounts to think about. What you've put in front of us today, panelists, if I can capture it well enough in the documentation that we've got, I think will be hugely helpful to the Research Assessment Advisory Committee, the Quality Board, and I hope Icelandic higher education in general. Thank you so much for delivering such a strong package today. The other comment I would like to make right at the end is for the international panelists. Thank you so much. I've been in panels like this, I've chaired panels like this. I don't think I can recall barely a single instance in which 3 speakers have kept so well to time that has facilitated and enabled us to enjoy the discussion that we've had after that. Terrific work. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you, Phil. And once more, thank you all presenters and panelists, Paula, Frank, Gunnar, Jonatli, Ragnhildur, and Phil, of course, and the audience. And also thank you for several very useful links you have put in the chat. So please use them also. And of course, great thanks to the REAC committee and Sigi for planning and organizing this webinar in practice. And I'm sure that this will, as Phil said, this will have a significant impact on the discussions on research evaluation in Iceland. This webinar will be followed with a face-to-face workshop on the same topics, and this workshop will be conducted in Icelandic on 1st of October, and the registration is now open on the Quality Board website, so please register for this workshop. And I wish you all a nice weekend, and discussions on research evaluation will continue. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. It was my pleasure. Bye-bye.